You chained my body, not my will.
You know that moment when you wake up and life feels normal for 2 seconds before it all comes crashing in? Yeah, that was me. Right up until I felt cheap polyester on my cheek and remembered I was tied to a motel bed like some cut-rate kink fantasy gone bad. The rope wasn't even real rope. Looked like clothesline from Dollar General. Classic Harper. Always saving $1 even when stabbing me in the back. I'll give her this, though. The knots were solid. My hands were going numb while their laughs echoed in my head like a pinball machine from hell. Harper's screechy cackle, Bianca's honking snort laugh that made you wonder if she'd been dropped as a baby, and Tess's weird giggle that always sounded stoned. "Good luck, Owen." Bianca had yelled before the door slammed, her voice trailing off with knee-slapping joy like this was peak comedy. The motel door rattled the walls like the whole place was held together with duct tape and prayers. Then I heard the real punchline, my own truck roaring to life in the lot. My truck, the one I'd been paying off for 3 years, gone with my gym bag and the $40 in quarters I'd been saving for laundry. I pulled and twisted until my wrists burned, trying to Houdini my way out, but Harper had always been weirdly good with her hands, just never in ways that helped me. The rope dug deeper, carving lines that would last longer than my marriage. The room stank of bleach and fake pine spray that had never fooled a soul. The carpet looked like it had fought 3 wars and lost all of them, every stain its own crime scene. An old TV played a soap opera on mute. Perfect. Even the universe was mocking me with quiet drama while I lived my own loud mess. After forever, longer than the extended Lord of the Rings, I freed one hand. And that's when it hit me like bad gas station sushi. I wasn't just stuck in a sleazy motel. I was stuck 900 miles from home. I'd overheard them before they spiked my drink last night. My sweet wife and her sisters had plotted every step. The fake romantic trip, the "let's spice things up" line, the mystery cocktails mixed like a science project. They took it all. My wallet, cards, the $37 in cash, my passport, since Harper had teased about driving to Canada, even my shoes. Seriously, who steals shoes? That's Old Testament level cruel. I peeked out the window in just my socks. My truck was gone. Only a rusty van sat in the lot and a raccoon by the dumpster having some kind of breakdown. No Harper, no Bianca, no Tess, no help. At the front desk, the clerk looked like he'd been carved out of bologna and cured in smoke for 40 years. His tag said Darren, but his vibe was pure DMV on its worst day. I explained my sorry tale with all the grace a man can while looking like a dumped stray. He just stared at me like I'd asked for a kidney. "No ID, no service," he muttered, eyes still on his phone. Probably Candy Crush. Motel policy, at a place that clearly rented rooms by the hour and had more health code sins than a gas station hot dog roller. I sat in that lobby what felt like half my life, watching people come and go like I was part of the furniture. Truckers, couples who couldn't keep their hands off each other, business folks who looked half dead. Nobody really saw me. I was just another sad part of the lobby. That's when I spotted him, a guy in coveralls walking toward a delivery truck. Big man, maybe in his 50s, with a face that said he'd been through plenty, but hadn't let it sour him. The side of the truck read, "Vince's Deliveries." I walked up in my socks, trying not to sound like I'd just broken out of a bad movie. "You wouldn't be heading anywhere that's not here, would you?" Vince gave me a once-over, taking in my sock feet and the look of a man whose life just blew up. Instead of calling for help, he nodded back at the motel. "Rough night?" "Rough year," I said. Then I spilled it all. My wife, her sisters, the prank, stranded, broke, shoeless, stripped of what little pride I had left. Vince listened, quiet, nodding here and there. When I was done, he reached in his truck and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil. Turkey and cheese. Smelled like heaven. "Rule 1, he said, handing it over. "You can't think on an empty gut. Rule 2, sometimes the world puts you right where you need to be, even when it feels like the worst place." On the 300-mile ride north, most of it quiet, I called the one person who might get it. Uncle Raymond, my dad's younger brother. Never married, lived in some fishing town, always seemed at peace. "Uncle Ray, it's Owen. I need a place to crash. Long story." Hardly a pause. "Always room for family, son." Always. Raymond's farmhouse looked like it had grown right out of the earth. Solid wood, real paint, none of it peeling. The porch wrapped around like open arms, rocking chairs worn from use. He showed me the guest room with no fuss. Just Bathrooms down the hall, towels in the closet, sleep as long as you need. No questions, no digging, just straight facts and the grace to rest. A few days later, Raymond sat with 2 mugs of coffee and a folded envelope. "Found some things you might need," he said, like it was coupons, not a lifeline. Inside was cash, enough to breathe again, a driver's license with my photo, but the name Owen Rourke and Raymond's address, and a phone number, Jeb Morrison, mechanic, friend, needs help, won't ask about your past. "Why?" I asked. "Why do all this?" Raymond looked out at the yard where fireflies blinked like broken stars. "Because everyone deserves a shot at who they're meant to be. Sometimes that means walking away from who they were." Jeb's garage looked like it was built in the 50s and hadn't been fixed up since the 70s. The kind of place where the coffee could peel paint, the radio never left classic rock, and the air tasted like motor oil mixed with sweat and hope. Walking through those bay doors felt like coming home. Jeb Morrison was just what you'd picture. Late 60s, built solid like a fire hydrant, hands worn to leather, mustache straight out of history. He tossed me coveralls with Pete stitched on the chest. Pete moved to Florida to die. His clothes might as well earn their keep. The work was just what I needed. Oil changes on trucks more rust than paint, brake jobs on vans that had hauled kids by the dozen, transmissions on cars that should have been junked years ago. I sank into the rhythm like pulling on old boots. My hands still knew how to coax life out of dead engines. The other guys accepted me without question. Billy pushing 60 but claiming 39, Tommy fresh from high school and convinced YouTube made him an expert, and Marcus who could diagnose problems by listening. Within a week, I was just Owen, the new guy good with transmissions who didn't complain when the ancient coffee maker produced something resembling motor oil. 3 weeks in, this guy came stumbling through the bay doors like he'd been running a marathon through hell. Tall, 30s, dark hair, face that suggested he'd seen things he'd rather forget. But what caught my attention was his shirt soaked in crimson red. "Jesus," Billy said, dropping his wrench. "Jeb, we got a situation." The guy, Callum I'd learn later, was trying to stay upright, but failing. One hand pressed against his side, crimson red seeping through his fingers. "Got jumped outside of town," he managed. "They took my car." I grabbed a clean rag and moved toward him. "Here, let me take a look." He looked like he was deciding whether to trust me or run, but whatever he saw in my face convinced him. The wound was deep, but not immediately life-threatening if we could stop the bleeding. "What's your name?" I asked, keeping him talking. "Callum Brooks," he said, wincing as I applied pressure. "Owen Rourke," I said. "You're gonna be fine." The paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, and just like that, he was gone, leaving bloodstains on concrete and a story that would become local legend. A couple days later, he came back, looking better than when he'd stumbled bleeding through our doors. "Wanted to thank you," he said. "Paramedics said you probably saved my life. Just did what anyone would do." "Not everyone would," he said, and something in his voice suggested experience with people who wouldn't. That's when he asked if he could buy me coffee. We sat on overturned milk crates, drinking coffee that could strip paint, and that was the beginning of something I couldn't have predicted. During a storm weeks later, Callum showed up at Raymond's soaked to the bone, walking through sideways rain like it was a casual evening stroll. We sat drinking coffee while lightning turned the windows into strobe lights, and that's when he told me his story. "I used to be a cop," he said. "Narcotics detective in the city. Had a partner, Martinez. Trusted him like family." His expression went dark. "Turns out Martinez was dirty, taking money from dealers, tipping them off about raids. But he was smart, made sure I looked dirty when things went sideways. When Internal Affairs investigated, Martinez fed them a fabricated story with evidence and witnesses. They couldn't prove I was dirty in court, but couldn't prove I wasn't either. Got the kind of retirement they give cops who might be crooked but aren't worth prosecuting. Lost my badge, pension, reputation. Martinez got promoted 6 months later." "That's why you didn't seem surprised when those guys jumped you," I said. "You're used to people trying to destroy your life." "Spent about a year feeling sorry for myself," he continued. Then realized the person I'd been, the cop who believed the system worked, who trusted his partner, that person was gone. So I could either mourn him forever or figure out who I was supposed to be. "They erased Detective Rivera," he said, standing to leave, "but they couldn't erase who I really am. Turns out that guy's a lot tougher than the cop ever was." Home invasion came months later. I found Raymond's back door hanging open, not kicked in, but just ajar, like someone had politely forgotten to close it. The house looked normal, too normal, but Raymond's desk drawer was pulled out 6 inches. The emergency cash envelope was gone, about $300, but everything else remained. Checkbook, spare keys, even his mother's jewelry box. When Callum arrived and assessed the scene, his cop instincts kicked in. This isn't random. Random thieves don't know where people keep emergency cash and don't leave behind jewelry and electronics. Someone's looking for you specifically. He turned into a one-man security installation crew, returning with enough hardware to secure a small bank. New locks that could stop a rhino, motion sensor lights visible from space, camera system feeding to his phone app. Sometimes, Raymond said while we worked on the dock later, the people who come back for you don't want you. They want control. 7 years passed. 7 years of honest work, quiet evenings on Raymond's porch, friendship with someone who understood betrayal. 7 years of peace, or close enough that I'd almost started believing it might last. The knock came on a Tuesday evening during rain that had a personal vendetta against anything not already underwater. I opened the door expecting a lost tourist or broken-down motorist. It was Harper. She looked older. 7 years will do that. Thinner, like she'd been living on stress and cigarettes. Shorter, darker hair, styled expensively, but definitely her. For about 2 seconds, she smiled, the real smile that had made me think I was lucky back when I was young and stupid. But then her eyes shifted past me, and her smile vanished like someone had unplugged it. I turned to see Callum standing in the hallway, not moving, not speaking, just there. Solid, calm, completely unimpressed by whatever drama was about to unfold. "Can we talk?" Harper asked. Same voice, same slight southern accent, same tone suggesting whatever she wanted was obviously important. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door. The rain kept us mostly dry under the roof. "Hello, Harper." "Been a while." "I know this is unexpected," she said, looking uncomfortable. "I tried to find you after everything, but you just disappeared. Funny how that works when someone abandons you in the middle of nowhere with no money and no ID. Disappearing becomes a survival skill. I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed harshly. "Harper, angry is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. What I felt after your little prank was something a lot more complicated." She looked down. "No wedding ring," I noticed. "I left them, Bianca and Tessa. We don't talk anymore." "Good for you." "Should have done that years ago." "I saw a video online. Bianca was on some podcast bragging about what we did to you like it was the funniest thing ever. It went viral, millions of views. People were outraged, called us monsters, said what we did was criminal." So that explained how she'd found me. Public shame had finally given Harper a conscience, apparently. "I've been looking for you for 3 years," she continued, "ever since I realized what I'd lost." "What you'd lost?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Harper, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. There's a difference. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I want to make it right." "Make it right? You gonna build me a time machine so I can go back and not waste 8 years married to someone who thought I was a joke? I thought maybe we could try again. I know it sounds crazy, but I've changed. I'm not the same person I was then." I stared at this ghost from my previous life, taking in the expensive haircut and designer jacket. Maybe she had changed, but it didn't matter. "Harper, I'm not the same person either. And the person I am now doesn't want anything to do with the person you used to be, are now or might become in the future." She looked past me toward the door. "Is it him? Is there someone else?" "It's not about someone else. It's about me, the person I became after you left me tied to that bed. I didn't tie you up. That was Bianca. I told her it was too much. You were there. You watched. You laughed. You took my wallet and shoes and left me there like trash." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I've regretted it every day." "Good. You should regret it. But your regret doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo what you did, and it doesn't make me the kind of person who takes people back after they've shown me exactly who they are." The rain was letting up. "I loved you," Harper said, voice breaking. "I still love you." "No," I said with surprising certainty. "You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone who would take whatever you dished out and ask for more. You loved having a husband who made you feel superior, and gave your sister someone to make fun of? That's not true. It is true, and we both know it. The only difference is, I finally figured it out. She glanced toward the door one more time. He seems nice. He is. He's also not someone who would ever tie me to a bed and drive away laughing. Harper flinched like I'd slapped her. I should go. Yeah, you should. She walked to a car I didn't recognize, something foreign and sleek, and drove away into the night. When I went back inside, Callum was reading like nothing had happened. You okay? He asked without looking up. Yeah, I said, surprised I meant it. Whatever power Harper had once held over me was gone. She'd come expecting to find the same guy she'd left tied up, someone who'd be grateful for any attention. Instead, she found someone else entirely, someone who didn't need her approval, love, or regret, someone who'd built a life that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with becoming who he was supposed to be. 8 months later, I testified in court. Bianca and Tessa had pranked another sufferer who ended up hospitalized with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. The prosecutor had tracked me down through that viral video where Bianca bragged about their crimes. Sitting in that courtroom, watching them try to look respectable in expensive clothes, I felt unexpected pity. Not for their situation, they'd earned every bit of trouble, but for the fact that they'd never learned other people weren't put on earth for their amusement. When they called me to testify, I walked to that witness stand feeling like I was representing every person who'd ever been someone else's punchline. I told them everything. Not just that night, but the years of systematic humiliation leading up to it. It wasn't just that night, I said, looking directly at the jury. That was the final insult after years of smaller ones. Years of being treated like my only purpose was to make them feel better about themselves. The courtroom went quiet in a way that felt different from normal quiet. This was the silence that happens when people hear something true and ugly, something that makes them uncomfortable because they recognize it. When the defense attorney suggested it was just harmless fun between family, I looked at the jury again. There's nothing harmless about systematically destroying someone's sense of self-worth for entertainment. They got convicted. Harper wasn't charged. She distanced herself before the recent incident, but justice felt good anyway. 7 years ago, they tried to erase me, turn me into a punchline. Instead, they freed me to become who I was supposed to be. The man sitting in that courtroom belonged to himself now, and that's exactly where he intended to stay.